Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joe's Classic Video Games back this evening with another really cool pinball repair video for you. We got in this cool Gottlieb Victory pinball machine. This is a System 80B. I believe it came out in 86-ish, 87-ish. Let's see if it says. It says copyright 1987 after they were bought by Premier. We bought this out of a guy's storage shed. And we started working through it a few weeks back before Christmas. We're filming this a couple days after Christmas. Still have the tree up. We bought this out of a guy's shed and started working through it. And so the first thing we did was we started working the playfield. It was fairly filthy. And so we pretty much got the playfield done. And the game boots, but it doesn't, not everything's working. So we're going to work through it and finally knock it out over the next couple days. So I thought, hey, why not film a video of that so people can see what goes into these? So this is what we're starting with. Like I said, the playfield has already pretty much been done. These had a really cool, the playfield is printed on Mylar on just a couple of the Gottlieb games, and so this was one of them. And so it's in pretty good shape. It's in much better shape now than it was when we got it, but you know, it's not perfect, but here it is. So we're going to work through it and get the thing up and playing. And you know what I think it needs first? I think what it needs first is some legs. So I'm going to mount the legs on it, and then we'll start working through the boards a little bit, see if we can get this sucker acting like a real pinball machine should. Alright, so that went pretty quick. We have installed the legs. I think originally these were supposed to be chrome, but they had painted over them whenever we bought the machine. So we painted back over them and made them look even better. And then we put new leg levelers and new bolts. You could buy new chrome ones and put them back the way they were, but that would be yet another cost we would have to pass on to our customers, and the things are already way too expensive. But if they want to do that, they can do that. So our next thing that we're going to do is we're going to work through some of the boards in the back. So we're going to check out the power supply in the bottom, and then we're going to check out the power supply in the back box. So I'll set that up and we'll see where we're at. Okay, we put the hood up and vacuumed out the inside a little bit to clean it up a little bit. So like we always do whenever we fix these, we just start from the wall. The power comes in, goes through a fuse in the back. There's the cord, goes through a fuse in the back. Goes through that, I think that's, what do they call those things? A thyristor, something like that. Anyway, usually you don't have any problem with any of that. And then it comes up here, and this is your first power distribution block. So you've got these 3 bridge rectifiers, which we tested and they were all fine. And you've got, this is a System 80B, and you've got all of these fuses. So all of those, a lot of people, they'll replace the fuses immediately. You can if you want, if you just make sure you put the exact same size in. But usually you can just clean them too. And if you've got a problem with a fuse that's blown, that will point to a problem with the machine, so you can track it down. We don't have any blown fuses. Also on the Gottliebs, all of the System 80s had ground problems. So basically the way it was designed, these are all the ground wires, and they ground to the side of the power distribution block in the bottom. Again, this is System 80B. The System 80A and the System 80, which were the earlier ones, are done differently. But on these, they have these plugs on the side. So the problem that you run into is if one of these loses its contact with ground, you'll get all kinds of problems. Usually it'll make it like a coil lock on or something. Or if it's one of the grounds running to like the main board, you might get problems where the board won't reliably boot, or it locks up, or blah, 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 blah. So there's different ways you can handle that. You can see on this one that one of the grounds, or a couple of them, already burnt up. Got too hot just because it was running so much, I guess, amperage through it. And so they put a new connector with new plugs on it on this unused top connector. You can do all that, or what some people will do is they'll tie them all together here farther back. And so that way, if one of them loses its connection over here, it can still connect through the other wires to it. That would help with your ground issues, if you have any ground issues. We may have to do that. And then, like we said, we're going to clean all the fuses. But they're outside of the 3 bridge rectifiers and this cap. There's not much to go wrong in the bottom other than the ground connections. Now the cap on the earlier System 80s, it's always a good idea to replace that if that's that orange cap. This one's to the point where they're starting to get pretty old too, so if you want your thing rock solid, you may want to consider replacing this cap. It is a 10,000 UF 25 volt. So I will see if we've got one of those that we can put in there to replace it. If you go up a little bit in value too, it's all right. Here's underneath. So we're going to work on that a little while, get it a little farther along, and then we're going to start looking at the back box. Okay, so we're in the back box. So once the power leaves the bottom that we were just looking at, it travels up these wires in the middle to this power supply right here. So what this always needs is this little potentiometer here. Goes bad, so you need to replace that, and we always resolder the connections on the bottom of the 2 connectors. This is your soundboard here. Usually doesn't need much work. This is an auxiliary power supply, which I think is mainly used for the soundboard. It usually doesn't need much work. And then this is your CPU. You can see it's still got the original battery installed on it, which will be taken off. Luckily it hasn't started to corrode anything, or if it has, it's just minor. And so we'll put a remote battery connector, a remote battery holder down here somewhere. And then this is the driver board, which again usually doesn't need too much work on these. You got to test everything though. So we will we'll get that power supply out and start working on that, and then work through it a little bit. All right, folks, here is the power supply. We put a new potentiometer on it, replaced that little cap because it was a what do they call those? Anyway, that's a 1 UF cap, replaced it. There's another little cap down here, but it's ceramic, so usually those don't go bad. And there's 2 little resistors. So there's not much to these, and a little trick you can do is whenever you replace the potentiometer, if you measure the resistance with the old one in there, then you can put in the new one and preset it to that, and then it'll be about right whenever you put it in. It'll still need adjustment though. But it's just a real simple board. These don't ever need replaced really, because you can replace everything on them really easily. They're just turning 12 volt into 5 volt. So we're going to bolt that in and pull the main board out. Okay folks, so I took the main board out, installed a remote battery holder, took that battery off, resoldered the back of the socket, and that's a problem sometimes. Replaced the power supply and adjusted the voltage to 5 volts, and the game is actually up and booting. We've got a little bit of a problem with the display here that we'll have to mess with, figure out what's going on with that. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to replace all the light bulbs underneath, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to work on the driver board next, and so I want to see if there's any bulbs that I can't get the light. And then, like, it seems to me like there's a bunch of them here in the middle that aren't working. And then if that way, whenever I get the driver board out, I can start looking at specific spots to see if the problem is the actual driver board. And here comes the popo. Okay, so we replaced all the light bulbs underneath the playfield, and the reason I did that first was so that I could try to track down which ones didn't seem to be working right. So there's 6 that I was able to find. So these 4 right here do not light up, so I'm not sure what makes those light up. It's kind of weird that all 4 of those aren't working. And then we've got this 100,000 one over here that's locked on, and then we've got a 100,000 one down here that never lights up. So those 2 there might be connected, and then I need to figure out what it is that turns these on. There might be a relay or something that does it, I don't know. Or those may actually be on those 2 expansion boards underneath that run these 2 strips here. They're unplugged right now, so those aren't working either. But all the other lights seem to be working right. And so next we're going to pull out this driver board, look it over a little bit, and I forgot to do the ground mod on the main board and the power supply, so I have to take them back out eventually. But we'll do the ground mod on it and test all the transistors and everything. Okay, so after looking through the schematics and messing around with it a little bit, there are these 2 auxiliary lamp boards down here on the bottom. Tested everything, everything's right. So ever since we got it, this one over here is working. We got a couple bulbs out, but this strip here was not working. But after looking through the schematics, I figured out that there's a relay right here. That if it goes one way, it turns this one on. And if it goes the other way, it turns that one on. And that also is why the light is on, off, off. And it's why this one down here is off, on, off, on. So all the lamps are working fine. There are 4 here in the middle. I can't figure out what the deal is with those. These 4, I'm not sure what makes those light up, so I'm gonna play it a little bit and see if that does it. But we've got all of our lamps working. I took the driver board out and put a ground wire on it and a ground wire on the CPU too. Still have to do it with the power supply. Basically on these, they have a ground problem where you have to tie all the grounds into the ground in the back box so that they're making good connection, because they use these plastic standoffs to connect them to the board so they don't get a good ground. So you have to put an actual ground wire on the ground plane of that, ground wire on the ground plane of this, ground wire on the ground plane of the power supply, and attach them all together. If you don't do that, what happens is sometimes there's resistance in the lines, and so this one will be operating at a different ground than this one, and it causes problems with the voltage difference. Also, we unplugged this little reset board. They're useless, basically. You don't even want that plugged in anymore. It will make the game reset when you do not want it to reset. So we're going to play it a little bit, and we're going to mess with the flippers. I also looked up what the display is doing. If you notice, the bottom is working fine, but the top is just jumbled. So I'm going to show you on the schematics why that is. Alright, so I'm looking at the schematics, and this is the display in a System 80B game. And I'm getting jumbled characters on the top display. Everything on the bottom display is fine. So if you look in the schematics, here's my display. Of course on this computer when it's broken in half, but so here's my display, and then here's my bottom display, which is working fine. So since the bottom display is working fine, you know all of this is fine, D21 through D40, which comes from this U2 chip, Zerupa. And then you also know all these A through N are fine, right? Which if you look, the A through N over here is connected to the A through N on the top one too. So in other words, they both get the same A through N signal, and it curves around here, and all of those come from U3. So you can't really have a problem with U3 or it'd screw up both displays, and you can't have a problem with U2 because it's making the bottom display work. So this U1, right, this one, all the outputs for it are right here, and that's what drives the top display. And so since it's the only thing that's only on the top display, it must be the problem. And then if you see this U2 is the same chip that's fed by DB0 through DB7, but if you look, this U1 is fed by the same things. So since the one chip drives the second one and that one's fine, and this chip drives the first one and it's not fine, it's pretty much got to be this U1 chip. So I've ordered some of these 10939s to swap in there for the U1 to fix it. But I think I've got another display that I'm going to swap into it just to test that theory. If I put another display in, then that pretty much proves that it can't be the CPU board or anything like that. It's got to be the display board. Alright folks, so after swapping in another display board, as you can see, it's working fine. So the problem was definitely on the display board, and like we were looking at on the schematics, it's probably that U1 chip. So I've got one of those ordered. I'll fix that other board, but until then, this one will live in this game. So we've done about all of the electronic stuff we can do, and all that's left now is to do some little finish up stuff, rebuild the flippers, things like that, some cosmetic stuff, and then get this thing put back together. And I will film a separate video of that showing off like how the game's designed and the gameplay and all that. But we figured we'd just shoot a little video for you, showing you what's involved to going through one and kind of bringing it back to life whenever you're it's in unknown condition. So we hope you enjoyed the video, working along with us a little bit, and we'll see you on the next one. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up, since we took the time to film all this instead of just blowing through it and not letting you see any of it. If you liked the video, give us a thumb up, leave your comments below, and we will see you on the next video.